President Yoon today departed for South America to attend this year's APEC and G20 summits, highlighting the strategic importance of the region. It was a big day for thousands of college entrance exam takers nationwide. Office hours were pushed back, public transportation was expanded, and this year there was a high number of those retaking the test as more admissions are allowed at medical schools. The nation's major game fair kicks off in Busan. What stands out this year? Brand new releases and unique content. It's November 14th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The South Korean president is heading to Peru and Brazil to partake in multilateral platforms aimed at promoting global security and economic stability. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon covers the agenda ahead.
As President Yoon has embarked on a trip to Latin America for the first time since his inauguration, President Yoon says the visit, quote, is highly significant in the expansion of Korea's vision as a global pivotal state towards the Latin American region. The president was speaking in an interview with EFE on Thursday as he also highlighted the growing strategic importance of the region, citing the recent rise of protectionism and worsening instability in global supply chains. Also during the interview, President Yoon addressed North Korea's recent deployment of troops to Russia, saying, quote, if they both do not stop their dangerous military adventure, we're prepared to implement appropriate effective measures, including strengthening support for Ukraine in cooperation with our allies and like-minded countries. He's set to use the two upcoming summits, APEC in Peru and the G20 in Brazil, to gain support against the military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang.
President Yoon will stress the importance of maintaining a rules-based international order for a sustainable future during the APEC and G20 summits and emphasize the need for international solidarity in addressing military cooperation between Russia and North Korea.
As for his schedule, Yoon's set to land in Lima, Peru on Thursday evening local time and starts his official engagements for APEC on Friday with the APEC Business Advisory Council and CEO Summit. The first session is on the same day under the theme Empower, Include, Grow. The APEC Summit comes as South Korea is set to host next year's APEC Summit in Gyeongju, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province.
President Yoon will emphasize South Korea's commitment as next year's APEC chair to leading discussions on fostering a free and stable trade and investment environment.
On November 16th, the APEC Leaders Retreat will wrap up the APEC schedule before Yoon's official visit to Peru begins with a summit with Peruvian President Dina Boluarte, which will be followed by a joint press conference. After this, President Yoon will take off for Brazil to join the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro on the 17th. On the 18th, he will start his G20 engagements with Session 1, where Yoon will address global hunger and poverty, while during Session 3 on the 19th, he will deliver a speech on clean energy. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And on the sidelines of the APEC summit, President Yoon is scheduled to sit down with his counterparts from the U.S. and Japan amid threats posed by North Korea and uncertainty given the upcoming transition in leadership at the White House. Our correspondent Woo Soo-young takes a closer look.
President Yoon will hold a trilateral summit with US President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba on Friday on the sidelines of the APEC conference in Lima, Peru. Seoul's presidential office on Thursday confirmed the highly anticipated meeting has been arranged, as the three sides look to reaffirm their agreements made at Camp David last year to deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threat and to jointly handle security and economic challenges in the region. The leaders will meet amid concerns that the incoming Trump administration in the US may not maintain the trilateral partnership, and as tensions rise over North Korea's deployment of troops to aid Russia's war against Ukraine.
What is deeply concerning about North Korea-Russia cooperation is that it could spiral into a worse, unforeseen scenario if Russia transfers advanced military technology, including nuclear weapons, to North Korea. Beyond energy and food supplies, Pyongyang's security threat to the world will reach unprecedented scale.
Yoon is likely to meet separately with Ishiba on Saturday, according to Japanese media, after Ishiba reinstated his leadership as PM. The two leaders are expected to build on their brief talks last month in Southeast Asia on preserving their trilateral cooperation with Washington and enhancing bilateral ties ahead of the 60th anniversary of normalizing diplomatic relations next year. Seoul is also trying to coordinate a bilateral summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping during Yoon's 8-day trip to Latin America. Yoon and Xi have only met briefly during the G20 summit in 2022 and at APEC last year in San Francisco. Their first sit-down meeting would signal a major step towards improving bilateral ties, which have been frayed in recent years amid the US and China's rivalry in the region. Observers suggest that as Pyongyang increases its military ties with Moscow and appears to act independently of Beijing's influence, it's in South Korea and China's interest to cooperate.
Early in the Yoon administration, there was a strong focus on the U.S. and Japan creating a distance with China. However, China's recent mention of visa exemptions could be a signal of its willingness to improve ties and resolve certain issues. In my view, trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S. and Japan is crucial. Managing relations with China and Russia, particularly with North Korea's complexities, is also necessary.
Although South Korea and the geopolitical security environment are different, Seoul should benchmark countries that are skilled at balanced diplomacy, such as UAE. We will have to observe how the incoming U.S. administration responds and China's discomfort over the North Korea-Russia situation and their future course of action. Each country will see their strategic considerations grow.
The biggest question is whether Yoon will meet former, now returning US President Donald Trump while he's on the other side of the Pacific. In their first phone call last week, Yoon and Trump agreed to meet in person soon to discuss various issues, including North Korea in detail. A Yoon official says the two sides have been communicating closely, but the incoming administration is currently focusing on domestic matters. Suneung, Arirang News.
Over in Washington, President-elect Trump has returned to the Oval Office for the first time in almost 4 years to meet with President Biden. Unlike then, the two agreed on a smooth transition of power. Choi Min-jung reports.
U.S. President Joe Biden and President-elect Donald Trump met at the White House on Wednesday for the first time since the presidential election last week. The two sat down for nearly 2 hours at the Oval Office. Both the incumbent and incoming president called for a smooth transition of power.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President,
thank you,
Donald, congratulations.
Politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much.
The Oval Office visit upholds the tradition of a peaceful transfer of power, a gesture Trump declined to extend to Biden in 2020 after falsely claiming Biden had not won the election. At the time, Trump filed lawsuits on voter fraud and was accused of helping incite a mob that attacked the U.S. Capitol. Despite this history, however, Wednesday's meeting was rather cordial. The two are expected to have discussed U.S. foreign policy, the logistics of handing over power, and the ongoing wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. The meeting comes as Trump continues his appointment of key roles in the upcoming cabinet and administration. On Wednesday, he named Senator Marco Rubio of Florida as his nominee for Secretary of State, Republican Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida to serve as his Attorney General, and Tulsi Gabbard, a former Democratic member of Congress and presidential candidate, to serve as his Director of National Intelligence. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The $1 exchange rate drops for the first time in 4 trading days following verbal intervention from South Korea's foreign exchange authorities. The won closed at around 14.05 on Thursday, 1.5 Korean won lower than the previous day. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok vowed to keep the market stable with tangible countermeasures in the event of severe fluctuations. This comes as the Korean currency broke past the 1,401 mark against the U.S. dollar amid the fallout from Donald Trump's election victory. Meanwhile, the benchmark Kospi rebounded after 5 consecutive trading days of losses, while Samsung Electronics shares fell below the 50,000 won mark for the first time in 4.5 years. Korea's auto industry noted a strong performance in October with on-year increases in output, sales at home, and shipments overseas. Kim Jong-sil explains what's driving this trend.
South Korea's auto industry achieved what officials are calling a triple plus last month, with October seeing increases in production, domestic sales, and exports compared to a year ago. It's the first time in 16 months that all 3 areas have shown growth at the same time. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy reported on Friday that South Korea's auto production reached 368,000 units in October, which is almost an 8% rise from last year. This was helped by an extra workday compared to last year and new model launches, including Kia's EV3 and K8, KG Mobility's Ection, and Renault Korea's Grand Koleos. Domestic sales were up too, with 146,000 units sold, which is a 3.1% increase from last year. It's the first time in 11 months that demand has picked up locally. Key reasons for this boost include the debut of Renault Korea's Grand Koleos and record sales of hybrid cars, which reached 49,000 units for the month. Exports rose by 5.5%, hitting a record $6.2 billion for October. Hybrid car exports were especially strong, surging 80% to $1.1 billion, marking another all-time high. Industry experts say this demand for hybrid vehicles is fueling the strong export numbers. Altogether, from January through October, auto exports hit a record total of $59.1 billion. Amid global market uncertainty, the government says it's working closely with the industry to keep this momentum going. It's encouraging efforts like the Korea Sale Festa this month, hoping the export growth can help lift domestic sales as well. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The plan to impose taxes on financial investment, which has been unpopular among investors, is set to be scrapped after years of delay and debate. For this topic, our finance correspondent Moon Hae-ryun joins us in the studio. Hae-ryun, what exactly is the financial investment income tax?
So it's pretty much exactly how it sounds. The financial investment income tax is a tax that imposes levies on profits made on financial investments. And this includes domestic stock investments above 50 million Korean won, roughly $35,000 or 2.5 million won, just under $1,800 from overseas stocks, bonds and funds. A 20% tax rate will be applied to the portion of profits exceeding their respective thresholds, and the rate increases to 25% for annual profits exceeding 300 million won. This tax was passed into law under a bipartisan agreement back in 2020 in an attempt to create a more equitable tax system. Currently in place is the capital gains tax system, where only large shareholders holding shares worth 50 billion won or more in a single stock, or owning a 1 to 4% stake in the company, are subject to the capital gains tax. There's also the securities transaction tax, which is levied on the act of trading stocks rather than on capital gains. The securities transaction tax rate has been gradually decreasing in recent years, as it was to be phased out for the financial income investment tax.
And walk us through the timeline and why this plan is being revoked before it's being implemented.
So originally it was set to be implemented in 2023, but its implementation was pushed back to 2025 as the tax was met with strong backlash from investors. And the Yoon administration pushed to repeal the law in order to stabilize the stock market. And just last week, the Democratic Party expressed support. Investors in South Korea worried that the financial investment income tax would discourage active participation in the stock market, leading to reduced trading volumes and potentially higher market volatility. As a new tax is imposed, individual investors are inevitably resistant to taxes, and there are concerns that large investors who influence supply and demand will sell off their holdings to avoid the financial investment income tax, leading to a decline in stock prices. Individual shareholders also felt that it favored institutions and foreign investors, as they would not be subject to the financial investment income tax. Although foreign investors pay taxes to their own governments according to the double taxation avoidance agreements, they could be indirectly benefiting from the financial investment income tax due to the reduction of the transaction tax rates.
If we eliminate the financial income tax, then the government may have no choice but to maintain the transactions tax for revenue purposes.
The administrative procedures of the financial investment income tax were also a burden on individual investors, as taxes would be withheld in advance and investors would then have to file a final tax return with the tax office to receive a refund for any overpaid taxes. President Yoon further claims that it was important to abolish the financial investment income tax before South Korea's government bonds are listed in the prestigious World Government Bond Index next year. Experts say that this is to maximize the benefits.
The government is using the opportunities presented by Korea joining the WGBI, which affects the bond market only, to also get some attention on the stock market, and abolishing the financial investment income tax is perhaps one way of doing it. But there are some...
And how are markets responding?
So immediately following the news, the country's benchmark Kospi jumped by more than 2%, and the tech-heavy Kosdaq recorded its biggest rise in 3 months as it surged by 3.43%. Here's what an expert said about why the Kosdaq can anticipate more gains from the repeal.
With a large concentration of individual investors, the Kosdaq market is particularly sensitive to changes in investment taxes. The repeal of the financial investment income tax has significantly boosted the attractiveness of the Kosdaq market for individual investors.
The domestic financial market has been unstable following the U.S. presidential election, so this latest move is expected to help reduce some uncertainties.
Domestic individual investors had been pulling back from the stock market, and some funds were flowing overseas. The repeal of the financial investment income tax has significantly reduced these uncertainties.
All right, thanks, Arirang, for the report.
Thank you for having me.
Here in Korea, most high school seniors and graduates took the annual college entrance exam today. Our An Song-jin went out to see and talked to some of the test takers about how they felt after the long day.
Students began to pour out after the 9-hour marathon. The National College Entrance Exam, also known as Suneung, had come to an end. It's been a long journey for these test takers who finished with relief, concern, or excitement.
I think it was a bit easy overall. It's out of my hands now.
I'm just going to play basketball all day. I'm happy that the exam is over. I just want to have fun with my friends now.
This year, more than 520,000 students took the test at nearly 1,300 test-taking centers across the country, which is nearly 20,000 more than last year. And this year saw the highest number of people retaking the test in the past 21 years. It's the first Suneung since the expansion of the medical school admissions quota, and as more students are expected to apply to med school, this may have led to the increase in test takers this year. With these extra students, competition was expected to be more intense with more difficult questions to separate them. However, the head of the examination committee said otherwise.
Based on data starting from last year, we tried to adjust the difficulty of the test, especially for test retakers. We also completely excluded killer questions, or the more difficult questions, and tried to distinguish test takers through materials from public education.
Starting off with the Korean language, the exam continued with math, English, and elective subjects. On the day of the test, most government offices and some companies pushed back their working hours to 10 a.m. And the Seoul Metropolitan Subway increased the number of trains running from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Test results will be out on December 6th, but until then, now that the Suneung is over, these test takers can relax and enjoy the various discounts being offered to them, recognizing their hard work and effort. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
People in South Korea who suffered damage from North Korea's trash-carrying balloons will be eligible for government compensation. The Nat'l Assembly passed an amendment to the Civil Defense Act today, allowing full or partial compensation for hostile action that falls short of a civil defense emergency, such as war or national disasters. This change follows property damage experienced by some residents from the north sending filled carrying balloons over the border. The amendment will take effect 6 months after its official announcement, with compensation covering damages dating back to last May. The country's biggest annual game fair is underway. This year, G-Star not only showcases new releases from major companies, but also gives significant attention to indie games. Our Yoon brings the story.
The southern port city of Busan is making waves in the gaming world as the 2024 edition of G-Star, South Korea's largest gaming exhibition, kicked off on Thursday at Bexco Convention Center.
The energy here at the 2024 G-Star Fair is buzzing. Gamers, developers, and creators are all coming together to showcase the latest and greatest in gaming. From cutting-edge technology to brand new game releases, this is where the future of gaming truly comes alive.
This year, marking the 20th edition, the event features more than 3,300 booths with over 1,000 game companies from 44 countries. Nexon, one of South Korea's gaming giants, is celebrating its 30th anniversary with a range of exciting games and events. Visitors can try new releases across 4 demo zones for PC, mobile, and console, and enjoy an exclusive gifting event where they can earn prizes by completing missions.
Every time I come, I have a great time exploring different games and experiences. But what I enjoy most is meeting my favorite streamers.
I've always loved games, and I guess that's what led me to enjoy cosplay as well.
Netmarble, another leading Korean gaming company, has announced its new Game of Thrones game, set for release early next year. G-Star attendees can get an exclusive first look.
Game of Thrones King's Road is an open-world action RPG being unveiled by Netmarble at G-Star. Based on the popular Game of Thrones series, the game lets players become the protagonist and interact with key characters while exploring hidden stories not seen in the show.
Steam, the world's largest game distribution platform, is not only making its debut at a Korean exhibition, but also showcasing unique and creative games from 60 indie developers. Under the theme Expand Your Horizons, G-Star 2024 also places a strong focus on indie games.
At first, the major game booths seem just as flashy as the big corporations. But after checking out the indie games, I feel indie games often have stronger stories and more depth.
Alongside the game displays, a wide range of events are taking place, including the Global Game Conference and the Game Cosplay Awards. Throughout the 4-day event, visitors can explore all aspects of the gaming industry to see what's new and what's next for the future of gaming. Yoon, Arirang News, Busan.
Temperatures rose to around 20 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day today, which was the day of the Suneung test. However, it has started to rain in most parts of the country by the end of the test. Rain began in western areas and has gradually expanded across the country. This rain will continue until tomorrow morning. The warm autumn weather will continue. Tomorrow, both morning and daytime temperatures will be warm, exceeding the average temperatures. As the daily temperature range is large, please take care of your body temperature. Tomorrow, Chuncheon and Gyeongju will start off at 11 degrees Celsius, Jeju 18 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 21 in Daejeon, Gwangju, and Busan, Chuncheon 19 degrees. Cold air will move south from next week, and the morning temperatures in Seoul will drop below zero on Tuesday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
our freedom back.
요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지.
제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기.
한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국 와보지 않고는 모를걸? 진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지?
김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선, 산에선, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥?
취향 따라, 입맛 따라. 이런 한국 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
Hello and welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring today's most pressing global issues into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. The 29th conference of the parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or COP29, is currently underway in Baku, Azerbaijan. On day one, nearly 200 nations agreed on a number of crucial ground rules for a credible, UN-backed international carbon market, ending a 9-year deadlock on Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement. Countries will now be able to pay for their climate ills through credits abroad. Buyers, mostly in wealthier countries, would be able to meet their climate goals by buying credits from projects that cut pollution. Though delegates still need to negotiate further on the document, pundits say this would be an effective tool to direct resources to the developing world while implementing climate plans. For more on the latest on COP29, we are joined by Michael Grubb, Professor of Energy and Climate Change at the University College London. Welcome to the show, Professor.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Chung Seong, Professor at the Division of International Studies at Korea University. Thank you for joining us, Professor Chung.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here.
Right. So let's start with Professor Grubb first. So this year marks the third consecutive year that an oil-producing country is holding the presidency, following Dubai and Egypt. What kind of significance does this hold? And could you also point out for us the importance of this year's COP29?
Well, I think it's partly accidental because the United Nations has a system whereby the conferences rotate between 5 regional groups in each year. So we had the Africa group, and Egypt was the strongest bidder there. The Asia Pacific group, and that went to Dubai. And this year was the turn of the Eastern European group, fairly broadly interpreted, which was a very difficult set of choices because previously it's frequently been taken by and hosted by Poland, but this time, because of the war in Ukraine, Russia had vetoed any East European member of the EU, at least. The rest of the world, or much of the West, vetoed Russia as host. So the remaining choices were rather limited. And the consensus in the end was to host Azerbaijan. Also, I think, not surprisingly, some of the oil exporting companies have bigger facilities, and you do need pretty big facility to host a COP of this scale. So those are the reasons. It has been commented on. There are various arguments oil producers have to understand and see what the climate change issue will imply for them. So it's not seen as wholly negative, but it has raised eyebrows.
Right. Can you also point out the importance of this year's COP29 for us?
Well, this COP29 had major agenda item on finance, which maybe we'll come on to later, but there were several other issues. One of them already quickly resolved in terms of the mechanisms that you referred to in the introduction. But generally now it's taking on a whole new significance in the light of the US election and President Trump. So I think partly this will be seen as a test of the extent to which the rest of the world is actually determined to keep the United Nations process going on climate change. It's not the first time it has had to deal with, in effect, a unilateral withdrawal from the United States. But this time maybe the stakes are higher.
Right. Now let's circle back to the Article 6.4. On the first day of the conference, countries agreed on the carbon trading rules under Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement. Professor Grubb, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's good to have agreed the rules. As you said, it's been many, many years in negotiations, and there's a basic tension that had to be resolved or reach a compromise, which is between the countries that were taking on quite ambitious targets and their industries saying, look, we could help to reduce emissions elsewhere, perhaps more cheaply, and that would also help to provide resources to developing countries or other activities. But the real concern has been if these rules are too loose, then targets start to become less clear and determined. And, you know, what can you count as an investment abroad, which will alleviate the extent to which you have to deliver at home? It's not a new issue for the United Nations climate process. We had a mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol called the Team Development Mechanism, which had quite a robust intergovernmental monitoring process. The agreement at the beginning of this week, in effect, is the first major block of reinstating a global governance of what actually it means to generate one of these credits, which will either reduce emissions elsewhere or, in this case, have added the potential to absorb carbon dioxide, called CDR, carbon dioxide removal, that would offset against emissions elsewhere.
Right. As you've mentioned, not everyone was happy with the fast-track decision-making process on Article 6.4. What are people's major concerns?
Well, I think the process concern is that it was taken by the supervisory body and, in effect, handed back to the UN COP almost as a fait accompli. So there's a sense that countries didn't actually get to engage directly in full with decisions. I think amongst the countries there were varied views about that process, some reservations expressed, but also a recognition that it was very helpful for the COP to get that hangover out of the way quickly. And obviously governments have been discussing it offline for a long time. Then you also have the substantive concerns from people who are just uneasy about this whole process of offsetting emissions when they say, look, the main fact is we have to reduce emissions, and some of the rest of this is a distraction and perhaps enables a bit of greenwashing of it's not really a proper emission reductions or it won't lead to the long-term solutions of absolute reduction. So there's been considerable unease from environmental groups about some of the content implications. Some details still have to be worked out, along with the reservations about the rather speedy process in the final stage.
Mm-hmm. Now let's invite Professor Chung into the conversation as well. As for South Korea, it has committed to reducing its national greenhouse gas emissions by 13% through international offsets by 2030. Professor, why is international carbon reduction efforts very important, and what are effective ways to achieve this?
Well, under the Paris Agreement, in principle, that emission reduction activities needs to be done through the implementation of the NDC, nationally determined contributions by each country. However, there is one very unique article under the Paris Agreement, that's Article 6, which allows the countries to implement NDCs by engaging international, bilateral, sometimes unilateral cooperation. because Korea has a very energy-intensive industrial structure, it's just difficult to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as much as we want, thinking about the potential cost of the reductions. Instead, Republic of Korea can be engaged with activities under Article 6 by utilizing and developing the emission reduction activities overseas. Thereby, we can not only help other countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also sharing the reduced emission outcomes for the implementation of the Korean NDC. In that sense, it can be a very cost-effective. Also, it can be a very good way of Korea's engaging with, especially developing countries, actually to meet the 2-degree now, 1.5-degree target under the Paris Agreement.
Right. And also, Professor, another key issue at COP29 is the establishment of a new collective quantified goal for climate finance. For starters, could you explain for us what the NCQG is and why it matters?
Right. Very few people know this very important factor that if we read Article 2 of the Paris Agreement, which is about objectives of the Paris Agreement, there are actually 3 objectives. First, mitigation. Second, adaptation. Third, ensuring financial flow. So all the features of the Paris Agreement comes with how we can invest, low carbon and carbon neutral technologies with adequate financing for both developed and developing countries, especially in case of developing countries, because of the lack of their capacity to secure sufficient financing, even back to the 2009 Copenhagen Accord, countries agreed to meet $100 billion per year. And this number needs to be updated. So countries are supposed to agree prior to 2025, using the baseline of $100 billion, maybe increasing more so that there will be a more financial flow guaranteed to implement the Paris Agreement. In that sense, NCQG has become the central element of the negotiation in this COP29 here in Baku.
Right, so it's become the standard. Now, the debate between developed and developing nations over the scale of climate finance and the specifics of its implementation is expected to intensify until November 22nd. Professor Chung, what are key points of contention?
Right. I don't think any country in this COP would say that I don't agree on increasing the goal.
Right.
However, there are differences in details. There are several elements that the countries still need to negotiate on and agree on ultimately. First is structure and scope, right? What kind of finance sources are important, right? Developing countries may prefer grants like ODA, without having any conditions. And then the developed country side, they will say, well, not only grants, but there are other innovative and creative finance resources available so that we can bring more private sector's involvement. So this structure and the scope is one of the important element that the countries needs to agree on. Second, of course, how much are we going to increase the goal? Right, amount of the goal, and then developing countries sounds like they prefer $1 trillion, and then the developed countries who are supposed to provide more financial assistances to developing countries, they will say, well, we recognize the importance of increasing the goal, but not maybe that much. We need to discuss about it. And the third, from the developed country's point of view, it's important for us to provide financial assistances to developing countries. However, we want to make sure that these money will be used to ensure the implementation of NDCs of developing countries so that actually there will be a contribution of actual reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, not using for other purposes. There are several elements that the countries are discussing on that.
Right, so they have different positions on that front. Then, Professor Grubb, what could be potential solutions to bridge the gap between developed and developing countries on the issue of climate finance?
Well, it's bound to be a very thorny issue, as already outlined. It always is, I think, between donors and recipients. Nothing new there, but no question there's going to be a lot of tensions over this. I think the options, a few areas. One is actually making smarter use of public money that's been available, particularly for mitigation now. There are lots of technologies that could accelerate emission reductions. They are fairly economic depending upon the level of risk that investors see. So using public money more to help guarantee or underwrite the risk of investments in renewable energy, for example, in developing countries, looks increasingly attractive. And it certainly would leverage a lot more private money than the public money you would need to set aside to underwrite those risks. So first of all, smarter use of the public resources. That also would enable perhaps more of the money to shift towards adaptation, which has been a long-standing request of developing countries. It's a lot harder to make money out of adaptation, whereas investing for renewable does generate a stream of energy to be sold. Second, I think new sources of finance need to be considered. There are a number of possibilities, a number of them connected one way or another with our policies around fossil fuels. Most obviously, putting a price on carbon is something that economists often recognize because it tries to reflect the damage that otherwise is not being considered by those using fossil fuels or making it. So, for example, South Korea has an emissions trading system. Many others do, including China. In Europe now, there's a very high degree of auctioning those allowances, so they're not given out for free. That generates a lot of money. Europe is now also moving to have a border-related levy for imports. In my view, that money would be legitimately and sensibly made available for international climate finance. So I think linking carbon revenues in some ways. And a final observation, just to emphasize, we've struggled to deliver 100 billion. When we actually look at the revenues to fossil fuel companies, it's 10 times that generally. During the energy crisis, we published an analysis, the energy crisis of 2022. The additional profits above expectations amounted to oil and gas companies amounted to about $500 billion. And that was in 1 year of energy crisis. And that's split between companies where I think one could certainly consider a supernormal profits tax and publicly owned companies. Many of them, for example, in some of the developing countries like Saudi Arabia or other state-owned companies. And I think there should be an open discussion about those sheer scale of revenues associated with the activities which are driving climate change.
Right. Now, at the beginning of our discussion, we also had to touch upon the U.S. elections. And, of course, concerns have been raised about potential impact of Donald Trump's re-election on global climate finance. Now, even if climate finance goals for developing countries are set at COP29, there could be possibilities for Trump to withdraw from such commitments. Professor, what is your perspective on this?
My perspective is a lot of people like to use diplomatic language, but I think you said they could. It seems extremely likely that the world is going to have to contend with a US president who will refuse to honour any commitments made by the present administration still in power just for another couple of months, because they've always been hostile to international finance of most descriptions. So that's going to put the system under real strain on the international finance. I don't know exactly how the negotiations will handle that. I have no doubt, though, that the other developed countries will be saying, obviously, the extent to which this can be delivered will be contingent on whether or not the US contributes. So that's going to be a big headache for the process. And one of the reasons why the world failed to deliver so long to deliver the 100 billion, the pre-existing, didn't do so till 2022, 23, was the fact of the previous Trump administration. So on finance, it's going to be difficult. It'll also be difficult on the politics of it. But I think reactions remain to be seen on the wider political impact. Obviously, some countries may want to use it as an excuse to pull back if they say the world's, still richest country is pulling away from the Paris regime. I think you may also see a reaction of, this treaty took years and years to negotiate. countries have been abiding by its terms. They are proceeding with their commitments, and they're not willing to let any country, not even the US, completely disrupt and destroy a global treaty of this nature. And that may provoke countries to actually be more insistent on their commitment to tackle climate change, because at the end of the day, whether or not the US is part of it, the same problem remains for the planet and all countries in the world.
Right. By the year 2025, countries will need to submit updated nationally determined contributions, NDCs, like we mentioned a while ago, for emissions reductions. And COP29 is expected to shape the direction of these updates. And we're aware that Professor Chung will be taking part in panel discussions regarding this issue over there. Professor, what is your outlook on this, and what kind of steps is South Korea taking in this regard?
Well, so I know that the government of Republic of Korea is still working on preparing for the updated NDC now. I know that they are working really hard in order to come up with very ambitious target and other related plans within the NDC. Here. The question is, what's going to be the level of the ambitious target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? That's number one. And number two, what are inside? How we can actually use it in a way of creating new jobs and boosting the new economy by deploying new technologies and then bringing the more investments into new area of the opportunities. And then I'm sure that the government is working really hard to come up with these details. In principle, that the Korean government is supposed to finish its work by end of this year, and then it might take a little bit more time, as I expect, because many other countries are preparing for the submitting NDC. But it seems to be they need to have a little more time to finish up the final documentation. So in that sense, I would like to say that Korea's NDC will be good enough to show to the entire world that Korea is making good contributions and to play a bridging role between the developed and developing countries. And then we will see how it finally comes in.
Right. Let's look forward to that. Now, finally, given the severity of the global climate crisis, Professor Grubb, what are your thoughts on the importance of global climate action and the efforts needed to address this crisis?
Well, maybe I'll comment first on NDCs. A few countries have started coming out with their proposed NDCs or their committed pledge. So Brazil did so recently with a significant reduction. The United Kingdom, I should say, it's in a slightly unusual position. The United Kingdom has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions by more than 50% since 1990. Largely, but not only because we've transformed the electricity sector with a very large increase of renewables and closure of our last coal plant last month. So the UK Prime Minister came to COP and earlier this week on the back of an already existing ambitious commitment for 2030 to go well beyond that 50% reduction achieved. He said that the UK NDC number will be 81% below 1990 levels. Now, I think that certainly has caught the eye. The UK does not have a complete implementation plan, but it is a clear signal that the UK has, in practice, once it's made a commitment, found it easier to reduce emissions than expected. And now that it has a much cleaner electricity system, is now looking at accelerating the rollout, for example, through electric vehicles in transport and industrial electrification. Some of it has been trade effect, but that is actually rather marginal in the current plans for this reduction. So the UK is hoping that that will really set something of a standard, or at least a challenge to other countries to say, if the UK, a strong G7 economy, can do this, surely others can up their game in terms of the level of ambition of NDCs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to make for a very interesting year as countries come forward with their commitments, and we shall see what that looks like a year from now or during the course of the next many months.
Right. So with that driver, let's hope that the world powers could ramp up contributions in their efforts to tackle climate change. Professor Grubb and Professor Chung, thank you so much for your time and your expertise tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지.
제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기.
한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸? 진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지?
김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선, 산에선, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥?
취향 따라, 입맛 따라. 이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day, our family started practicing Taekwondo, and it turned out to be a special blessing for us. Taekwondo family, return to happiness.
옛날에는 택시부터 시작해가지고 버스, 덤프트럭, 낮과 밤이 없이 몸이 부서지도록 일을 했죠. 그러다 보니까 몸이 많이 망가졌어요. 허리 협착증도 생겼고 무릎도 아프고. 이제는 내 삶이 다 됐는갑다 생각을 하고 사는 것도 싫고 완전 좌절을 했죠.
지팡이를 짚고 다니실 만큼 근력이 약해지셔가지고 너무 힘들었는데 우연찮게 실버 태권도라는 거를 알게 되셨어요.
다리도 안 올라갔거든요, 솔직히. 근데 64세부터 태권도를 해서 7년째 하고 있습니다.
인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해 하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did Mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
표현 정확히 합시다. 우린 태풍을 못 막은 게 아닙니다.
안녕하세요. Riding on the Korean wave. Welcome to Thursday's edition of The Culture Wave. I'm Kwon So-hwa in Seoul. Explore with us Korea's culture from all aspects and stay up to date with K-entertainment, K-trends, K-education, K-everything. And we're joined by our co-host Bella Kim today. Hello, Bella.
Hi, Soa. And hello, everyone, tuning into today's episode of The Culture Wave. Today, we'll start off with extra energy to cheer on all the high school students who have Suneung, which is the Korean college entrance exam. So, fighting! And of course, stay tuned for my K-entertainment segment coming up very shortly.
Right, today is Thursday. Thursday is not only Bella Day, but every year Suneung takes place on a Thursday in the month of November. And we're also going to look into more diverse aspects of the Suneung exam in our Trend Vibes segment with Seong in a bit. So stick around, everyone. But first, here's something to look forward to next month for fans of a Korean Netflix series. So the world-famous Netflix series Squid Game is returning in the month of December for season 2 with a more extravagant set and a new game. The production team said that in an effort to prevent any spoilers, the ending was only known to a few actors. Jin has this story.
Squid Game achieved phenomenal success with its first season in 2021 and is now returning with its second season for the global audience. If season 1 focused more on the participants taking part in the Squid Game for a huge amount of money, season 2 focuses on the return of the main character, Sung Gi-hoon, and his revenge journey to find the game's host.
When I first looked at the scenario, it was even more exciting than season 1. How can such a scenario be written?
For the second round of Gambling Life for Money, new faces joined to make up a star-studded cast, including actors Yang Dong-gun and Park Sung-hoon.
I killed off all the popular characters of season 1, so there are new characters, and they are starting a new game. That's the biggest difference from season 1.
And with immense interest during the filming of season 2, special attention was paid to ensuring no content was leaked. The script was delivered in an online format that could not be printed or easily shared.
Even the actors didn't know who dies when. Only very few of the actors knew the end of the script.
Regarding the controversy surrounding the casting of former Big Bang member Top, who served time in jail for illegal drug use, the director explained that it was indeed a difficult decision, but it was his judgment call that Top was the right fit for the character he plays.
Why this character needed to be played by this actor. The only way to show it is through the final production.
The much-anticipated season 2 of Squid Game will be released on December 26th, with a third season scheduled for release in 2025 to conclude the series. Jin, Arirang News.
So December 26th it is. I think it'll feel like an extended holiday with this series, being released a day after Christmas.
Right.
So bit by bit, we're seeing new scenes of season 2 of Squid Game. And I think already the part of the set was revealed last year.
I think this is a very good strategy because more and more people are, anticipating for this coming up second series. And watching the interview makes me even more curious about, how the actors from season 1 will play along with the new actors that's joining for season 2.
Right, and I'm actually already curious about the final season as well.
I know.
But I really like the fact that the producers are being on extra high alert to prevent any leakages of the plot. And also, I think spoilers are also a very big challenge nowadays, you know, with the era of OTT platforms, right?
Right, because not everyone watches these Netflix series or this OTT series simultaneously.
But you know, with Squid Game 2, I can imagine that almost all fans around the world will be stuck to the screen almost simultaneously. And now we would like our viewers to stick to the screen as we have some interesting culture-related news with our AI anchor, Ari.
Welcome to the Culture Wave AI News. Here's our first story of the day. Korea's largest design industry exhibition, Design Korea 2024, has opened at COEX in Seoul, bringing together experts from Korea and abroad. Hosted by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, the event focuses on AI-based design strategies and roles of artificial intelligence in daily life. More than 400 companies are participating in exhibitions, international conferences and business matchmaking events. Running through Sunday, highlights include the unveiling of the UK-based Dada Project's collaboration with Google DeepMind, LG Electronics, personalized empathy robot, the AI companion Q9, and Hyundai Motors' AI-powered personal mobility platform, DICE. The Korea Heritage Agency has published a series of books introducing Korea's chang-making culture. This collection details the fermentation process for creating soybean paste and soy sauce, while also exploring the cultural significance of chang-making as an intangible heritage. The series, available in both Korean and English, was distributed to public libraries across Korea, UNESCO-accredited NGOs, and universities abroad that offer Korean studies programs. This publication follows UNESCO's evaluation body recommending the inscription of Chang-related practices on the Intangible Cultural Heritage List. The breathtaking autumn foliage on Jeju's iconic Hanlasan Mountain reached its peak on Wednesday. According to the Jeju Regional Meteorological Administration, the peak arrived 18 days later than last year and 16 days behind the seasonal average. Typically, Hanlasan Mountain would be vibrant with color by late October. But this season, the autumn foliage was delayed until November. This year's fall foliage started at the latest time since records began in 1991 and reached its peak at the second latest time since 1999. That's all from me. Keep it tuned to the Culture Wave.
Time for some K-Entertainment news with Bella Kim. Now, Bella, for our first story, we have an update regarding a conflict between New Jeans, girl group New Jeans, and music agency Adore, right?
Yes, that's right. On Wednesday, New Jeans sent a legal notice to their agency Adore, warning that they would terminate their exclusive contracts if their demands were not met. The members submitted the certification of contents under their legal names, requesting Adore to address significant breaches in their contracts within 14 days of receiving this letter.
So what are they requesting for?
The exact details are not revealed, but here are some of the specifics that are included. First, they requested for a legal action on the issue behind HYBE's internal report about, quote-unquote, throwing away new, which means New Jeans here, and starting fresh. And they also asked for a formal apology from the manager who told another group to ignore Hani the other day, as well as the deletion of videos and photos used without their consent.
And as you said, if these demands are not met within 14 days, the group is bound to terminate their contract.
That's correct.
Now, Bella, for starters, this conflict actually dates back to around April. So could you give us a rundown of the conflict?
For sure. The conflict first began when Adore filed a correction request to HYBE related to the copyright issue with with new jeans. And then HYBE requested an investigation into Min Hee-jin over breach of trust. And in response, she held a buzz-making press conference on April 25th. As they continued with these legal matters, on August 27th, HYBE terminated Min Hee-jin as Adore CEO. And throughout this whole process, Newjeans supported Min as they held a YouTube live stream, and also Hani attended a parliamentary hearing at the National Assembly as a witness.
So we're probably going to see more developments in the next weeks.
Right.
So please keep us updated on that issue. But Bella, on a different note, we have a song release, and I think this is especially good news for you.
Yes, it is a good news for me as well. Do you remember it was last week, I think, actually, I mentioned how I love old K-pop?
Yes, that was when Sari McIntosh was here in the studio, the singer-songwriter.
Right.
So what do you have about old pop or old K-pop?
Old K-pop, yes. Well, singer Lee Moon-se, we can't go talking about old K-pop without mentioning Lee Moon-se. He pre-released 2 songs, Love Even in Goodbyes, 이별에도 사랑해 in Korean, and My Blues on Wednesday, before the official release of his 17th full-length album. For people who are not familiar with Lee Moon-se, he is one of South Korea's most renowned singer, a living legend known for his, timeless ballad songs. One of the pre-release songs, Love in Farewell or Love Even in Goodbyes, is a song that reminds people of various separations, not only between lovers, but between various precious people in their lives.
Oh, I see. And what about My Blues?
My Blues, on the other hand, is written and composed by Lee Moon-se, and it captures honest emotions and situations he felt over a long period of time working as a singer. And these 2 pre-release songs follow after another pre-release track that was back in December of last year, Warm is Better Than Hot. And as Lee Moon-se, gradually releases one song at a time, one track at a time, he aims to complete his 17th full-length album by the end of 2025, which is next year.
Oh, so Lee Moon-se has been around for a long time, but his fans won't have to worry about a retirement because he said that he's going to sing for at least 20 more years.
Exactly. So he'll stick around
for the fans.
and also for me, because I love Lee Moon-se as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Bella, for those K-Enter news.
My pleasure.